Thanks for your service, my sister texted, attached to a photo of her new restaurant sign, paid for with the lake house my grandmother left me. I was sitting on a cot 6,000 miles from home when that message came through. My grandmother, her name was Margaret, but everyone called her Maggie May, had been dead 4 months. The lake house she left me in her will, the one on Lake Meredith where I learned to swim, where I cried the night before I shipped out, was gone. Sold. My parents forged my signature on the paperwork while I was deployed overseas. Every dollar of that $450,000 sale went straight into my sister's brand new restaurant. I stared at my phone in the dark. The blue glow lit up the ceiling of a temporary barracks I shared with 3 other officers. My sister's face smiled back at me from the photo. Behind her, a wooden sign read, Maggie May's Table. She named it after our grandmother. She used the money our grandmother left me, and she sent me a smiley face. I didn't respond to that message. Not that night. Not the next week. Not for 3 months. My family thought my silence meant I'd accepted it. They thought 6,000 miles of distance and the weight of a deployment had made me too tired to fight back. They thought I'd come home, sit down at the dinner table, and swallow it the way I'd swallowed everything else. They were wrong. When I finally flew home, I didn't drive to my parents' house. I didn't call. I walked into a courtroom with a folder full of evidence my father never saw coming, and what the judge said that afternoon made him collapse into his chair in front of everyone. Before I go on, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely connect with this story. Drop a comment with where you're watching from and your local time. I always love hearing from you. My name is Helena Wolf. I'm 28 years old. I'm a captain in the United States Army, and this is the story of how my own family robbed me while I was serving my country, and what happened when I came home. Now, let me take you back 18 months, to the night I got the call that my grandmother had passed. Growing up in the Wolf house, you learn the hierarchy fast. My father, Richard Wolf, sat at the head of every table, literal and figurative. He'd spent 26 years managing a branch of First Union Bank before retiring early. He kept the household budget on a spreadsheet. He approved purchases over $50. When he talked, you didn't interrupt. When he decided, you didn't question. My mother, Diane, held the second chair. She hadn't worked outside the home since 1994. Her job was keeping peace, which meant keeping us in line with whatever Dad wanted. Her favorite phrase, "Your father knows best." Then there was Vivian, my older sister, 3 years ahead of me. She'd bounced between 4 jobs by 25, but it didn't matter. Dad covered her rent. Mom defended her choices. Vivian was the golden child, pretty, agreeable, close to home. The daughter who stayed. I was the other one. I was the one who joined ROTC in college. The one who told my father at Thanksgiving dinner, junior year, that I'd accepted a commission in the Army. He set his fork down and looked at me like I'd slapped him. "You'll regret this," he said, in front of everyone. "The military doesn't care about you, Helena." My mother pressed her napkin to her mouth. Vivian studied her plate. Nobody said a word. Only one person drove me to the airport the day I shipped out to Officer Basic. My grandmother, Margaret Wolf. 74 years old, 5'2", hands steady on the wheel of her old Buick. She hugged me at the curb and said something I carried through every deployment, every long night, every moment I doubted myself. "This house will always be here for you, Helena, and so will I." I didn't know that was the last summer I'd see that house with my name still on it. I was 14 weeks into a logistics deployment in the Middle East when I found out she was gone. Not a phone call, an email. From my mother. "Your grandmother passed Tuesday. Funeral is Saturday. We understand you can't make it." 4 sentences. That was it. The woman who raised me every summer, who taught me to gut a fish and balance a checkbook, and stand up straight when men talked over me, reduced to 4 flat sentences in an email sent at 2:47 a.m., my time. I went to my commanding officer that same morning. Emergency leave was approved within hours. I called home to tell them I was catching a flight from Kuwait. My mother answered on the 3rd ring. Helena, honey, everything's already planned. The flowers are ordered. There's really no point in disrupting. I can be there by Friday night. Long pause. I heard my father's voice in the background, low, indistinct. Then my mother again. Your father thinks it's best you stay. You'd just be rushing in and out. Grandma would have wanted you focused on your duty. They didn't want me there. I sat on the edge of my cot for a long time after that call. Then, at 3 a.m. local time, I watched my grandmother's funeral on a live stream. The camera was propped on someone's lap. It shook. Vivian stood at the podium. She dabbed her eyes with a tissue and read from a piece of paper. Grandma loved all of us equally, she said. She would want us to stay together, to take care of each other. I turned off my phone. I lay in the dark and listened to the hum of the air unit bolted to the wall. 200 people had been at that service. I recognized most of them. Not one of them had called me. At the time, I told myself my family was just being thoughtless. I didn't realize yet that they needed me absent. I just didn't know why. 2 weeks after the funeral, I received an email from my grandmother's estate attorney, a man named Philip Darnell. Attached was a PDF, the last will and testament of Margaret E. Wolfe. I read it on my phone in the mess hall, surrounded by the clatter of trays and the smell of reheated coffee. The document was straightforward. Grandmother's savings and personal belongings, jewelry, some bonds, divided evenly between my father and me. But the lake house on Lake Meredith, the property she'd owned for 31 years, assessed at roughly $450,000. That went to one person. Me. My throat tightened. I set the phone down, picked it up again, read it twice more. Then I stepped outside into the heat and called home. My father answered. Dad, I just got the will from Mr. Darnell. I can't believe Grandma left me the lake house. Silence. Not the kind that means someone is thinking, the kind that means someone is deciding what to say. We need to talk about that, Helena. His voice was flat, controlled. That house has been in this family for 30 years. Your grandmother wasn't thinking clearly at the end. She seemed clear to me every time we talked. You weren't here. You don't know how she was. I gripped the phone tighter. It's what she wanted, Dad. We'll discuss it when you're home. And he hung up. I stood in the sun for a while. I tried to call Mr. Darnell, but he assured me the probate process was proceeding normally. Nothing to worry about. Everything being handled. I should have worried more. I should have pushed harder. But I was running logistics for a forward operating base, sleeping 4 hours a night, and I made the mistake that people who trust their families always make. I assumed they wouldn't actually do it. 3 months passed. The deployment settled into its hardest stretch. Long days, short nights, the kind of operational tempo that leaves no room for anything except the work in front of you. 14-hour shifts, supply chain disruptions, convoy schedules that changed every 48 hours. I emailed my father twice about the probate. No response. I called my mother on a Saturday. She picked up and spoke quickly, the way people do when they don't want to stay on the line. Everything's being handled, honey. Don't worry about it. Have you heard from Mr. Darnell? Your father's dealing with all of that. Can I talk to Dad? He's at the hardware store. I'll have him call you. He never called. I tried Vivian once. Straight to voicemail. At night, when the base went quiet, I'd lie on my cot and stare at the ceiling. Something was wrong. I could feel it the way you feel a shift in weather before the clouds come, pressure in the air, a weight you can't name. One night I dreamed I was standing on the dock at Lake Meredith. The water was still. My grandmother stood at the end of the pier, her back to me. She raised her hand, waving me forward. I walked toward her, but the dock kept stretching longer. I never reached her. I woke at 2 a.m., heart pounding. The next day, during a break between shipments, I called Mrs. Calloway, Maggie Calloway, my grandmother's neighbor and closest friend. She'd lived 2 doors down from the lake house for 20 years. Funny you called, dear, she said. I saw a for sale sign near the lake last month. Couldn't tell which property from the road. I stopped breathing. Might be the Hendersons finally listing, she added, but I wasn't sure. I told her it was probably nothing. I thanked her. I hung up. But my stomach already knew what my mind refused to accept. It took me 40 minutes to find the county assessor's website. My hands were shaking so badly I mistyped the property address twice. I was sitting on the floor of the communications tent, laptop balanced on my knees, the overhead lights buzzing. It was past midnight. I'd waited until no one else was around. The page loaded. Property address: 1140 Lakeshore Drive, Lake Meredith. Owner of record, transferred. Sale date, March 14th. Seller, Helena Wolf, via power of attorney, represented by Richard H. Wolf. Sale price, $450,000. I read it 3 times. Helena Wolf. My name. My signature. On a document I'd never seen, for a sale I'd never authorized. On a date when I was standing in a warehouse outside Kuwait City counting pallets of engine parts. I sat on that floor for a long time. The screen blurred. I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand and read it again. Then I called my father. He answered on the second ring. Casual. Helena, good to hear from you. Did you sell the lake house? 5 seconds of silence. I counted. It was the right thing to do, Helena. His voice didn't waver, not even a little. Your sister needed the capital. The restaurant is an investment for the whole family. You'll understand when you get home. You forged my name. I made a decision for this family. That's what fathers do. I hung up. I didn't cry. I didn't throw the laptop. I sat there on the floor of that tent with the buzzing lights above me, and something inside me changed shape. It didn't break. It hardened. That was the moment I stopped being his daughter. Not legally. Not yet. But in every way that mattered. The woman who would have begged, who would have argued, who would have called crying. She was gone. What replaced her was a plaintiff. 2 days later, my phone vibrated during a briefing. I glanced at the screen under the table. Vivian. A photo. A storefront with a wooden sign. Hand-painted script. Gold on dark green. Maggie May's table. Below the sign, Vivian stood in a chef's apron, arms wide, grinning. Behind her, through the glass door, I could see pendant lights and white tablecloths. Under the photo, one line. Thanks for your service. Grandma would have loved this. I stared at that message for a very long time. She named the restaurant after our grandmother. The grandmother whose lake house funded every square foot of it. The grandmother whose will, the legal, witnessed, notarized document that said this house belongs to Helena, meant nothing to any of them. And my sister sent me a smiley face. I left the briefing early, walked back to my quarters, sat on the edge of my cot, opened my laptop. I typed an email to Major Daniel Crow. He was a JAG officer stationed at the same base, Judge Advocate General's Corps, military lawyer. I'd met him during a pre-deployment brief 6 months earlier. He'd given a lecture on service member protections. I remembered thinking at the time that I'd never need anything like that. Subject line: I need legal advice. It's personal. I attached 3 things: the county assessor record, a screenshot of Vivian's text, and the PDF of my grandmother's will. Then I closed my laptop and sat in the silence. I didn't text Vivian back. Not that night. Not the next day. Not for 3 months. My family interpreted my silence as defeat. They believed I'd swallowed it. They believed the distance and the deployment and the exhaustion had done what they always expected it to do: make me disappear. But I wasn't silent. I was building a case. Major Crow didn't do emotion. He did procedure. We met in his office the next evening, a plywood-walled room with a folding table, 2 chairs, and a stack of binders taller than the desk lamp. He'd already reviewed my email. Were you stateside on the date of the sale? No. Did you sign a power of attorney? No. Did you authorize anyone, verbally, in writing, by any means, to act on your behalf regarding that property? No. He wrote something on a yellow legal pad. Didn't look up. Then what we're looking at is forgery, and depending on jurisdiction, possibly wire fraud if funds were transferred electronically. He paused. And there's something else working in your favor. He set down his pen. You were on active duty under federal orders. The Service Members Civil Relief Act gives courts broad discretion when a service member's rights are compromised during deployment. It won't be the basis of your civil claim. The forgery does that on its own. But it tells the court exactly who your father chose to victimize, someone who couldn't fight back because she was serving her country. Judges notice that. The room felt very still. Can I handle this quietly? I asked. Within the family? Crow looked at me. He had the kind of face that didn't move much. Level eyes, flat expression. Like a poker player who'd long ago stopped pretending he was playing a game. Helena. First time he'd used my first name. They forged your signature on a legal document and sold your property. This isn't a family disagreement. This is a crime. First step is a police report, Crow said. You'll file that stateside. It creates a formal record. From there, you want a civilian attorney for the civil side, and the DA can decide on the criminal side. The two tracks run parallel. I sat with that for a moment. The air conditioner rattled in the wall. What do I need to do? Document everything. Every text, every email, every phone record. Don't contact your family again. Anything you say can complicate things. And when you're stateside, we'll connect you with a civilian attorney who specializes in real estate fraud. I nodded. That night, I started a folder on my laptop. I labeled it Meredith. Over the next 3 months, it grew thick. The silence drove them crazy. 3 weeks in, my mother started calling. I let every call ring through. The voicemails stacked up like geological layers, each one revealing more pressure, more desperation, more guilt. Week 1. Helena, honey, why aren't you picking up? I'm getting worried. Week 2. Your father is hurt that you're ignoring us. We're your parents. Week 3. Is this about the house? We did what was best for the family. You're being selfish. She texted too. Long threads that ping-ponged between worry and accusation. I can't sleep. Are you safe? Followed 12 hours later by, I didn't raise you to be this petty. Vivian added her own pressure. A photo of the restaurant interior, freshly decorated, candles lit on every table. Wish you could see this in person. Mom's been crying because of you. Because of me. My father sent exactly one message. It arrived at 6:14 a.m. My time, which meant he'd typed it late at night, possibly after a drink. No greeting, no sign-off. When you're ready to act like an adult, call me. I read every word they sent. I screenshot every message. I saved every voicemail. I forwarded everything to a dedicated email address that Major Crow helped me set up. Each item was logged with a date, time, and sender. At night, while the base slept, I sat on my cot with my laptop and built a timeline. The date my grandmother died. The date of the funeral. The date the power of attorney was notarized. The date the house was sold. The date the funds were transferred. The date of Vivian's text. Each date I cross-referenced with my deployment orders, which placed me firmly on the other side of the world. Every message they sent, every voicemail dripping with guilt and accusation, they were building my case for me, and they had no idea. Major Crow connected me with a civilian attorney named Rebecca Holt. She practiced out of Raleigh, specialized in real estate fraud, and had a reputation for being thorough in the way a surgeon is thorough, precise, unhurried, and unsentimental. Our first video call happened at 11 at night my time. Rebecca's office was bright behind her. She'd already pulled the public records. Walk me through the family dynamic, she said. No small talk. I gave her the short version. She listened without interrupting, then turned her screen to show me a document. This is the power of attorney your father filed with the county. It authorizes Richard H. Wolfe to sell the property at 1140 Lakeshore Drive on behalf of Helena Wolfe. She zoomed in on the bottom of the page. That's supposed to be your signature? I looked at it. The handwriting was close. My father had practiced, but the slant was wrong. The tail on the A in Helena curled the wrong direction. It's not mine. I know. She scrolled down. The notary who certified this is a man named Greg Parson. Licensed notary in your father's county. And this is the part that matters. He and your father worked together at First Union Bank for 9 years. The air left my chest. Standard procedure, Rebecca continued, requires the signer to appear in person before the notary, or, at minimum, verified identity through a remote process. Neither happened here. Your father walked in with a forged document, and his old colleague stamped it. What's the penalty for that? Forgery of a deed or similar instrument is a Class H felony in North Carolina. That carries 4 to 25 months in prison. And a permanent criminal record. She paused. For your father? The notary could face his own charges, and he'll almost certainly lose his commission. I said nothing for a long time. That's my father. Rebecca's voice softened, just slightly. I know, but he made that choice when he signed your name. She told me one more thing before we hung up. Helena, the restaurant your sister opened? If it was funded with proceeds from a fraudulent sale, every dollar is traceable. Every single one. Rebecca moved quickly. Within a week, she had the forged power of attorney sent to a forensic document examiner, a woman named Dr. Linda Pace, board certified, with 20 years of courtroom experience. I provided comparison samples. My real signature from military records, tax filings, my officer commission paperwork. All on file, all verifiable, none anywhere my father could have accessed. While Dr. Pace did her work, I made another call. Maggie Calloway picked up on the first ring, like she'd been waiting. I need to ask you something, I said, about my grandmother's state of mind when she made her will. Sharp as a tack, Maggie said immediately. Your grandmother balanced her own checkbook until 3 weeks before she passed. She drove herself to the attorney's office to sign that will. I know because I went with her. My chest tightened. You were there? Sat in the waiting room. She came out and said, "It's done. Helena gets the house." And then she told me something I never forgot. I held my breath. She said, "Richard will try to take it. That's why I'm putting it only in Helena's name, not the family." Helena. I pressed my hand over my mouth. My grandmother knew. She saw it coming. She knew her own son well enough to predict exactly what he would do, and she'd tried to protect me the only way she could. If you ever need me to say that in front of a judge, Maggie added, her voice steady, I will. I promised your grandmother I'd look out for you. And I don't break promises, sweetheart. I thanked her. I tried to keep my voice even. I mostly succeeded. After we hung up, I sat alone in my quarters for a long time. My grandmother had known. She'd known. And she'd built what walls she could around me. It wasn't enough to stop my father. But it was enough to prove, if it ever came to that she'd intended every word of that will. Meanwhile, my sister was building a monument to her own guilt and posting it online for everyone to see. Vivian launched an Instagram page for the restaurant. Professional photos, warm lighting, carefully styled plates. She wrote long captions about family and legacy. One post got over 200 likes. The caption read, "This restaurant is my grandmother's legacy. Our whole family came together to make this happen. Grandma always said food brings people together. This is for you, Grandma." Our whole family. I read that line sitting on my cot at 1 a.m., and something cold moved through me. I wasn't part of our whole family. I was deployed. I wasn't consulted. I wasn't asked. My name was forged on a legal document so my sister could hang Edison bulbs and buy a commercial oven. But Vivian didn't see it that way. To her, this was a feel-good story. Granddaughter honors grandmother's memory through food. Beautiful, shareable, likable. The comments poured in. So beautiful. Your grandma would be so proud. My mother had commented too. So proud of you, sweetheart. Nobody asked where the money came from. I screenshot the post, the caption, the comments, the date stamp, the engagement metrics. I sent it to Rebecca. Her reply came within the hour. This is public evidence that she's spending the fraudulent proceeds and constructing a false narrative. She's using the word family to imply collective consent. Keep documenting everything she posts. So I did. Every photo, every caption, every comment. I saved them all in the folder labeled Meredith. My sister was telling the world a beautiful story about our grandmother. She just didn't realize that every word of it was building a case she couldn't take back. The money wasn't the worst part. I found out the worst part on a Tuesday, during a routine email exchange with Maggie Calloway. She'd been sending me small memories, stories about my grandmother, recipes she'd found in Grandma's kitchen, photos from holidays I'd missed. They were a kindness I didn't know I needed. Then, buried in a long email about Grandma's garden, Maggie wrote something that knocked the air out of me. She tried to call you, for the last 2 years. Over and over. She'd phone your parents' house and ask them to pass along the message. She didn't have your military number. She told me once, "Helena never calls back. I think she's forgotten about me." It broke my heart. I read it twice. Then I read it again. My grandmother never had my direct number. She was 77, not comfortable with email, and she'd always called through my parents' landline. That was how we'd done it my whole life. She'd call the house, and they'd patch me through or pass along a message. But I hadn't received a single message from her in 2 years. Not one. I couldn't prove then that my father had deliberately intercepted her calls. But the timeline was damning. She called. He answered. The messages never reached me, and when I asked about her, he told me she was slipping. Maybe there's an innocent explanation for that. I've looked for one. I haven't found it. But he had. He'd answered her calls and told her I was too busy. He'd hung up and told me she was slipping. He'd cut the line between us, cleanly, deliberately, and let my grandmother spend the last 2 years of her life believing her granddaughter had forgotten her. She died thinking I didn't care. I cried that night. Not for the house, not for the money, for the phone calls that never reached me, for the old woman sitting by her kitchen window, wondering why I'd stopped calling. He didn't just steal my property. He stole the last 2 years I could have had with my grandmother. And that is something no court on earth can give back. My deployment ended in August. I flew from Kuwait to Ramstein, then Ramstein to Fort Liberty. 22 hours of travel, 3 connections, and a headache that sat behind my eyes like a clenched fist. Somewhere over the Atlantic, I turned my personal phone back on. 11 missed calls, 6 voicemails, 23 texts, my mother's name, over and over. I opened the most recent text, sent 4 hours earlier. We're all coming to pick you up. Vivian's closing the restaurant for the day. Dad's cooking your favorite, pot roast and potatoes. It's time to put this behind us, honey. We love you. I could see it so clearly, the 3 of them waiting at arrivals. My mother with a handmade sign, Vivian with a bakery box, my father standing slightly apart, arms crossed, jaw set, ready to accept my surrender with a firm nod and a one-armed hug. They wanted to wrap me in a homecoming before I could think straight. Smother the anger with sentimentality. Put me at the dinner table, pass the potatoes, and say, "We're family," enough times until it felt true. I'd seen this play before. Every holiday, every argument, every time one of us stepped out of line, the Wolf family reset button. Sit down, eat, pretend it didn't happen. Not this time. I called my mother, kept my voice level. Don't come to the airport. I need a few days to settle in. Helena, please. Your father is trying. I'll call when I'm ready. I hung up. Then I dialed Rebecca Holt. I land Thursday. When can we file? Rebecca paused. The complaint is drafted and ready. But Helena, there's something you should know first. Her voice shifted. The notary, Greg Parson. He's agreed to cooperate. I closed my eyes. The plane hummed around me. What does that mean? It means he's scared. And scared people talk. That night, alone in my hotel room near the airport, I almost called my mother. My thumb hovered over her name for a long time. Some part of me, the part that still remembered birthday cakes and braided hair and being carried to bed, wanted to hear her say she was sorry. Wanted to hear her say it was a mistake. that they'd fix it, that I could come home and it would be like before. I put the phone down. Because before was a lie too. I just hadn't seen it yet. I landed Thursday afternoon. By 5 o'clock, I was standing in my apartment near Fort Liberty, a one-bedroom I'd rented before deployment, barely lived in, still smelling like cardboard and cleaning product. I dropped my duffel by the door, locked the deadbolt, and stood in the silence for a moment. Then I heard voices. I turned the corner into the living room and stopped. My father sat on my couch, legs crossed, one arm stretched along the back. My mother stood in the kitchen, unpacking grocery bags. Vivian leaned against the counter, scrolling her phone. They all looked up at the same time. "Welcome home, soldier." My father smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. Vivian held up a white box. "I brought something from the restaurant. You have to try it." My mother rushed toward me, arms open, tears already falling. "We missed you so much, honey." I didn't move. I looked past them to the kitchen counter, where my spare key sat next to a bag of lemons. "How did you get in?" "I used the emergency key," my mother said, still reaching for me. "You gave it to me before you deployed, remember? In case something happened." I remembered. In case of emergency. In case the pipes burst. In case I died overseas and someone needed to collect my things. Not for this. "I asked you not to come." The room shifted. Vivian lowered the box. My mother dropped her arms. My father uncrossed his legs. "You're our daughter. We don't need an invitation." "You used a key I gave Mom for emergencies." I kept my voice flat. "This isn't an emergency. This is a boundary. Please leave." Nobody moved. The refrigerator hummed. Vivian tried to laugh. "Helena, come on. It's just dinner." "Please leave," I said again, and opened the front door. My father didn't move. He looked at the open door, then back at me, and sat down again. "You want to throw your family away over a house? This isn't about a house, Dad. Your grandmother would be ashamed of you. Don't speak for her. I am her son. And I am the person she chose to leave it to." His jaw tightened. My mother stepped between us, hands raised, the peacekeeper deploying her standard protocol. "Helena, please, you don't know what it's been like for us. Your father has been under so much stress. Vivian invested everything she had. If you take this further, you'll destroy your sister's business, your father's reputation, this whole family. You destroyed my trust when you forged my name." The word hung in the room. Forged. My mother flinched. Vivian set the bakery box on the counter. When she spoke, her voice was harder than I expected. "Oh, come on, Helena. You were gone. You're always gone. You didn't even come to Grandma's funeral." She spread her hands. "What were we supposed to do? Let a $450,000 house just sit there?" I looked at my sister, looked at her carefully. "I wasn't at the funeral because Dad told me not to come." Vivian blinked. My mother looked at the floor. My father stood up. He walked toward the door slowly like he was doing me a favor by leaving. At the threshold, he stopped. Close enough that I could smell his aftershave. "If you do what I think you're about to do," he said quietly, "you won't have a family to come back to." I met his eyes. "I haven't had one in a long time." He walked out. My mother followed, crying. Vivian picked up her box and left without looking at me. I closed the door. Locked it. Called a locksmith. Then I called Rebecca. "File everything." Rebecca filed on Monday. The complaint named Richard H. Wolfe and Vivian R. Wolfe as defendants. The charges: real estate fraud, forgery, conversion of property, and breach of fiduciary duty. Attached to the filing was a formal request that the court refer the evidence of criminal forgery to the district attorney's office for prosecution. 2 days later, a process server rang the doorbell at 47 Birchwood Lane, the house where I grew up. I wasn't there for it, but I know exactly how it went because 3 relatives called me within the hour. My father opened the door. He read the front page of the summons. According to my Aunt Janet, who was visiting for coffee that morning, the color drained from his face so fast she thought he was having a heart attack. My mother came running. She read it over his shoulder and had to sit down on the porch steps. Vivian received her own summons the same afternoon. She was named as a co-defendant, a knowing beneficiary of fraudulently obtained funds. My father called me 7 times that evening. I watched each call light up my screen and let it ring. Vivian called once. Her voice on the voicemail was shaking. "Are you serious? You're suing me? Your own sister? Over a house?" Over a house. That was still how she framed it. Over a house. By the end of the week, the family narrative machine was running at full speed. My father called every relative he could reach. "Helena is suing her own parents. Can you believe it? After everything we've done for her." My mother posted a vague status on Facebook. "When your own child turns on you, all you can do is pray." Some relatives called me. Most were confused. A few were angry. I gave each one the same answer. "You're welcome to attend the hearing. The truth will be there." That same week, Rebecca filed a separate criminal complaint with the district attorney's office. Forgery, fraud, the civil case, and the criminal track would run in parallel. The hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday in October. Courtroom 3B, County Courthouse, a small brick building with a flagpole out front and a parking lot that smelled like hot asphalt. I arrived 20 minutes early. I wore my Class A dress uniform. Olive jacket, brass buttons, captain's bars on the shoulders, unit crest on the left pocket. Rebecca had been the one to suggest it. "You're an active duty officer whose rights under federal law were violated. The uniform tells the court exactly who was harmed." Rebecca met me in the hallway. She carried a leather binder 3 inches thick. Behind her, Major Crow sat on a bench. He'd requested leave to attend as a character witness. He nodded once when he saw me. Said nothing. Didn't need to. In the 3rd row, near the window, Maggie Calloway sat with her hands folded in her lap. Her white hair was pinned back. She wore a blue cardigan my grandmother had given her. Beside her, on the bench, she'd placed a small photo album. At 9:47 a.m., the door opened again. My father walked in first. Dark suit, red tie, back straight. But his eyes were bloodshot, and his jaw was clenched so tight I could see the muscle jumping. My mother followed. Black dress, tissue in hand. She scanned the room and found me immediately. Our eyes met. Hers were swollen. Vivian came last. Black dress, dark circles under her eyes. She didn't look at me. Their attorney, a man named Gerald Pratt, competent enough for small-town real estate closings, but clearly out of his depth in a fraud case with forensic evidence and federal overtones, directed them to the far table. I later learned my father had called 3 other firms first. 2 declined after reviewing the case. The 3rd quoted a retainer he couldn't afford. My father looked at me across the aisle, looked at the uniform. Something moved in his expression. Surprise? Maybe? Or recognition. The daughter he'd dismissed had come back dressed in exactly the thing he'd told her she'd regret. I held his gaze for 2 seconds. Then I turned to face the bench. The judge entered. We all rose. Judge Patricia Whitmore was in her late 50s, with reading glasses on a chain and a voice that carried without effort. She reviewed the filings, then turned to Rebecca. "Counsel for the plaintiff, proceed." Rebecca stood. She didn't rush. "Your Honor, the plaintiff, Captain Helena Wolfe, is the sole named beneficiary of real property located at 1140 Lakeshore Drive, Lake Meredith, per the last will and testament of Margaret E. Wolfe, deceased." She opened her binder. "We will demonstrate that the defendant Richard Wolfe fabricated a power of attorney bearing the plaintiff's forged signature, had it fraudulently notarized, and used it to sell the property for $450,000, while the plaintiff was deployed overseas on active military orders." She laid out the evidence with the precision of a surgeon arranging instruments. Exhibit A, the forensic handwriting analysis from Dr. Linda Pace, concluding with 99.7% certainty that the signature on the power of attorney was not Helena Wolfe's. Exhibit B, my military deployment orders, not cited under SCRA, but as direct evidence that I was physically incapable of signing any document in the state of North Carolina on March 14th. Exhibit C, the property transfer records showing the $450,000 deposited directly into an account registered to Vivian R. Wolf. Exhibit D, text messages from both defendants, demonstrating knowledge and intent. Rebecca highlighted Vivian's text to me, the photo of the restaurant sign with, "Thanks for your service." She showed the Instagram posts where Vivian wrote, "Our whole family came together." Then she pulled up bank records showing the $450,000 deposited directly into Vivian's personal account, not a family account, not a trust. Vivian's name, Vivian's account. Ms. Wolf didn't just benefit from the fraud, Rebecca told the court. She received the proceeds, she knew the source, and she publicly celebrated it. The defense attorney adjusted his glasses, stood slowly. "Your Honor, my client believed he was acting in the best interest of the family estate. There was a verbal understanding." "Was there written authorization from the property owner?" Judge Whitmore asked. "No, Your Honor." "Then there was no authorization. Continue." The defense attorney called my father to the stand. Richard straightened his tie and walked to the witness box. "My mother wasn't thinking clearly when she wrote that will," he said. "The house was always meant to stay in the family." Judge Whitmore looked at him over her glasses. "Mr. Wolf, was your mother declared mentally incompetent by any medical professional?" "No." "Did you contest the will during the probate process?" "No." "Then the will stands as written." My father sat down. His shoulders dropped 2 inches. Judge Whitmore reviewed her notes. "Plaintiff's counsel, do you have additional witnesses?" "One more, Your Honor. Mrs. Margaret Calloway." Maggie stood slowly. She smoothed her cardigan, my grandmother's cardigan, and walked to the witness stand with the careful steps of a woman who knew exactly where she was going and why. Rebecca asked the first question. "Mrs. Calloway, how long did you know the decedent, Margaret Wolf?" 42 years. She was my neighbor and my dearest friend." "In your observation, was Mrs. Wolf mentally competent when she drafted her will?" Maggie's chin lifted. "Margaret Wolf was the sharpest woman I ever knew. She balanced her own checkbook until 3 weeks before she died. I drove with her to the attorney's office the day she signed that will. She walked in alone. She walked out and told me, 'It's done. Helena gets the house.'" Rebecca paused. "Did she say anything else?" Maggie looked directly at my father. Her voice didn't waver. She said, "Richard will try to take it. That's why I'm putting it in Helena's name. Not the family. Helena." The courtroom went still. I saw my Aunt Janet press her hand to her mouth. My father stared straight ahead, unblinking. "There's one more thing," Maggie continued. She hadn't been asked, but no one stopped her. "Margaret tried to call Helena for 2 years before she passed. She'd phone Richard's house and beg him to pass along a message. He never did." Her voice cracked. "She told me once, 'I think Helena has forgotten about me.' She died believing that. And it wasn't true." Something small and terrible happened in the room. The air changed. The relatives who'd come to support my father shifted in their seats. One of them, a cousin I hadn't seen in years, looked at Richard like she was seeing him for the first time. My mother covered her face. Vivian stared at the table. My father didn't move at all. "Mrs. Wolf was not confused," Maggie said softly. "She was afraid. Not of dying, of what her son would do after she was gone." Judge Whitmore nodded once. "Thank you, Mrs. Calloway." Judge Whitmore took 15 minutes to review her notes. No one in the courtroom spoke. My mother's quiet crying was the only sound, rhythmic and thin, like a clock running down. The judge removed her glasses, set them on the bench, looked at my father. "The court finds clear and convincing evidence that Richard H. Wolf fabricated a power of attorney bearing the forged signature of Helena Wolf, had it fraudulently notarized by a licensed notary with whom he had a prior professional relationship, and used that document to sell real property belonging to the plaintiff, while the plaintiff was deployed overseas in active military service." She paused. "Let the words settle. This court is deeply troubled that the defendant chose to exploit a window of time when the plaintiff, an active duty service member deployed overseas, was physically unable to monitor or protect her own property. While the core of this case is forgery and fraud under state law, the court notes that targeting someone who is serving this country adds a particularly troubling dimension to the defendant's conduct. She turned to the documents in front of her. The court orders the following. First, the court finds the power of attorney fraudulent and the resulting property sale to be the product of forgery. Given that the property has since been conveyed to a bona fide purchaser with no knowledge of the fraud, the court will not unwind that transaction. Instead, the defendants shall bear full financial responsibility. As the property has been transferred to a bona fide purchaser who acted in good faith, the defendants shall pay full restitution of $450,000 to the plaintiff. Second, additional damages in the amount of $85,000, covering loss of property use, legal costs, and compensatory damages. Third, the court has been made aware that the plaintiff has separately filed a criminal complaint with the district attorney's office. Given the evidence presented today, this court will forward its findings to the DA to assist in that investigation. Forgery of a legal instrument is a Class H felony under North Carolina General Statute 14122. She looked at my father one final time. Mr. Wolf, the law does not bend for good intentions, and what you did shows no good intentions at all. Richard sat very still. His attorney leaned over to whisper something. Richard didn't respond. His hands, which had been folded on the table, slowly opened. His head dropped forward. Then his whole body sagged. Shoulders, spine, everything. And he slumped into his chair like someone had cut the strings holding him up. Diane cried out, "Richard!" Vivian jumped to her feet. The bailiff stepped forward. But my father wasn't having a medical emergency. He was having something worse. He was a man who'd controlled everything his entire life. His bank, his wife, his daughters, his mother's legacy. And in one afternoon, in front of his family and a room full of witnesses, he'd lost it all. The courtroom emptied slowly. My father was helped to his feet by his attorney and the bailiff. He walked out without looking at anyone, one hand on the wall for balance. He moved like a man 20 years older than he'd been that morning. I was gathering my things when my mother appeared in the hallway. She'd stopped crying. Her face was tight, blotched, furious. "Are you happy now?" She blocked my path. "You've destroyed your father." I looked at her. The woman who'd taken my emergency key and used it to ambush me. The woman who'd watched her husband forge my name and said nothing. The woman who'd posted on Facebook about her ungrateful child while I was building a legal case 6,000 miles away. "He destroyed himself, Mom. I just brought evidence." She opened her mouth, then closed it. She stepped aside. Down the hallway, Vivian stood alone. Her attorney had already left. She was gripping the strap of her purse with both hands, knuckles white. "The restaurant," she whispered. "My restaurant." Rebecca stepped forward, professional and even. "Ms. Wolf, I'd suggest you speak with your attorney about restitution options." I walked past them both. Through the double doors, into the October sun. Maggie was waiting by the stone bench outside. She stood up when she saw me and opened her arms. I stepped into them and pressed my face into that blue cardigan, my grandmother's cardigan, and cried. Not from victory. There was no victory here. Just a woman getting back what should never have been taken, at a cost no one should have to pay. "She'd be so proud of you," Maggie said into my hair. Across the parking lot, Major Crow leaned against his car, arms folded. He caught my eye and gave a single nod. Nothing more was needed. I drove home alone. I didn't turn on the radio. I pulled my grandmother's photo from my wallet, the one from the lake, the two of us on the dock, me at 10 years old, and propped it on the dashboard. I sat there a long time. The weeks after the hearing moved in a straight line. The district attorney's office opened a formal investigation into the forgery. My father hired a criminal defense attorney, a different one from the civil case. The retainer alone, I was told, cost more than his car was worth. Greg Parson, the notary, folded almost immediately. His cooperation statement was plain. Richard Wolf came to my office and told me this was a family arrangement. He said his daughter had given verbal consent. When asked if he'd verified my identity, confirmed my presence, or followed any of the legally required procedures for notarizing a power of attorney, Parson admitted he hadn't. He'd stamped it on the strength of a 20-year acquaintance and the assumption that a former bank manager wouldn't lie. His notary license was suspended pending a full review by the Secretary of State's office. The new owners of the Lakehouse, a couple named the Brennans, retirees from Charlotte, were contacted by Rebecca's office. They'd purchased in good faith, through a licensed agent, with no knowledge of the fraud. The court protected their ownership. My restitution would come from my father and my sister, not from the people who'd innocently bought the home. As for the money, the $535,000 in total, restitution plus damages, the court gave my father and Vivian 90 days to begin structured payments. If they failed, we'd be back before Judge Whitmore with a contempt motion. Vivian's restaurant hadn't turned a profit. It had been open 4 months and was hemorrhaging money. The equipment was leased. The lease on the building was 12 months, non-transferable. Every dollar she'd poured into Maggie May's table was a dollar stolen from me and built on a document that never should have existed. Rebecca called me on a Friday afternoon. "The system is moving, Helena. Let it do its work." I hung up and sat on my porch. The sun was going down. Somewhere, my father was reading criminal statutes with a lawyer he couldn't afford. I didn't feel better. I just felt right. Small towns have long memories and short fuses. Within 2 weeks of the hearing, everyone in my parents' circle knew. Not because I told them. I didn't post anything, didn't make a single call. The courtroom had done the work. A reporter from the county paper had published a short item in the court proceedings column, a civil fraud case involving a forged power of attorney and the sale of a deceased woman's property. No names, criminal charges hadn't been filed yet, but in a town of 11,000, everyone knew who lived on Lakeshore Drive. The phone calls came to me in a slow, steady wave. First, my Aunt Janet. She was crying. "I knew something was wrong at Thanksgiving when your father got so defensive about the house. I should have said something. I'm sorry, Helena." "It's okay, Aunt Janet. You didn't know." "I should have asked." Then cousins, old family friends, people who'd been at my grandmother's funeral. Some just left voicemails, short, awkward, kind. "Heard what happened. Thinking of you." A few admitted they'd called me ungrateful before the hearing and were ashamed. I responded to each one the same way. "Thank you. I appreciate you reaching out. But I need time." Not everyone was kind. 2 of Vivian's friends sent messages I didn't finish reading, accusations of jealousy, cruelty, ingratitude. I read the first lines, then deleted them. They didn't know me. They knew Vivian's version. One text stood out from the rest. An old neighbor of my parents, a man named Frank, who'd known my grandmother since the 1980s. He wrote, "Your grandmother was a good woman who raised a good granddaughter. I'm sorry it came to this." I saved that one. I read it on nights when I wasn't sure if what I'd done was worth the wreckage. It always was. Money reveals what character hides. Vivian couldn't pay. Maggie May's table had never turned a profit. It was a dream funded by stolen money and decorated with someone else's legacy. Within 6 weeks of the ruling, Vivian listed the restaurant's equipment for sale. The commercial lease couldn't be transferred. She negotiated an early termination with the landlord that cost her another $8,000 she didn't have. The sign came down on a Thursday. I know because Maggie Calloway drove past and told me. "That green sign with your grandmother's name on it," she said. "It's gone." Good. My father's situation was worse. The criminal defense attorney's fees were climbing. His retirement savings, the ones he'd guarded so meticulously all those years on his spreadsheets, were bleeding out. He and my mother put the family home on Birchwood Lane up for sale, the house where I grew up, the house where he'd sat at the head of the table and decided what happened to everyone in it. They moved into a 2-bedroom rental apartment on the east side of town. My mother sent me one final text. "I hope you can live with yourself." I read it. I didn't respond. I saved it. Habit by now. Vivian moved to Asheville. She got a job managing someone else's restaurant. No ownership. No sign with her name on it. No Instagram posts about legacy. I didn't celebrate any of this. There's nothing to celebrate when your family burns down and you're the one holding the match, even if the fire was their fault. But I did one thing. I took a portion of the restitution and contacted my old high school. I set up a small scholarship fund for graduating seniors planning to serve. Military, Peace Corps, AmeriCorps. Anything that took them away from home to do something larger than themselves. I named it the Margaret Wolf Memorial Scholarship. Not because I wanted anyone to know, because my grandmother always said, "Help the ones who have no one in their corner." She would have liked that. I drove to Lake Meredith on a Saturday in November. I didn't plan it. I'd been running errands, dry cleaning, oil change, the ordinary machinery of a life reassembled, and found myself on the county road that led to the lake. I followed it without thinking, the way your body remembers a route your mind has tried to forget. The house was still there. New paint, a soft gray, replacing the white I remembered. New fence. The porch railing had been replaced, and the old wooden swing was gone. In the front yard, the new owners had planted sunflowers, tall and heavy-headed, leaning toward the road. I pulled over and turned off the engine. The dock was visible through the side yard. Same shape, same weathered wood. The water behind it was flat and silver, catching the November light. I remembered the summer I was 12. My grandmother sitting on the end of that dock, bare feet in the water, a paperback in her lap. I'd asked her why she liked the lake so much. Because water always finds its way, Helena. She hadn't looked up from her book. You can dam it. You can divert it. But it always finds the path forward. I sat in my car and looked at the sunflowers. They hadn't been there when it was ours. Nothing about the property was mine anymore. Not the gray paint, not the new fence, not the dock. But the memory of her sitting there, feet in the water, telling me to keep moving, that was mine. No forged signature could touch it. No courtroom could award it to someone else. I started the engine, pulled back onto the road. The radio came on. Some country song I didn't know, steel guitar and a woman's voice singing about going home. I rolled down the window and let the lake air fill the car. The house wasn't mine anymore. But what it taught me, that no one gets to take what's yours just because they're louder or closer or more willing to lie, that was mine forever. 6 months passed. I stayed at Fort Liberty. I was promoted to a new logistics position, one I'd put in for before deployment and forgotten about in the chaos. The Army doesn't care about your family drama. It cares about performance. I showed up every day, ran my section, and let the work steady me. I rented a small place near Jordan Lake. Not much. 1 bedroom, a screened porch, a dock shared with 2 other units. On Saturday mornings, I sat on that dock with coffee and watched the herons work the shallows. It wasn't Lake Meredith. It wasn't my grandmother's house, but it had water and quiet and the sound of nothing going wrong. I didn't contact my parents. My mother mailed me 2 handwritten letters. I recognized her looping script on the envelopes. I opened them, read them. They were full of hurt and accusation and, in the second one, a thin thread of something that might have been regret. I put them in a drawer. My father was negotiating a plea deal through his criminal attorney. I didn't follow the details. Rebecca kept me informed when it mattered. That was enough. Vivian was in Asheville, working, silent. The person I spoke to most was Maggie Calloway. She called every Sunday afternoon. We talked about small things. Her garden, my work, the weather at the lake. Sometimes she told me stories about my grandmother. Sometimes she just listened. "I'm not trying to replace Margaret," she told me once. "I know. But I'm here, as long as you need." I also joined a veterans support group that met Wednesday evenings at the community center near base. I didn't share my story for the first month, but when I did, briefly, without self-pity, several people in the circle nodded. They'd lost things too. Different things. But the shape of the loss was familiar. One woman said afterward, "You didn't lose your family in combat." She looked at me. "You lost them at a notary's desk." I never forgot that. The letter arrived through Maggie. Vivian had mailed it to Maggie's address. She didn't have my new one. 2 handwritten pages, front and back, in Vivian's tight, slanted script. Maggie called before forwarding it. I didn't read it, but I wanted you to know it was coming. I opened it that evening on the screened porch, with the last light coming through the trees. Vivian wrote the way she talked, direct, a little unpolished. No flourish. She didn't start with an apology. She started with a confession. I knew the money came from the house. I knew Dad forged your signature. I told myself it didn't matter because you were gone and the army takes care of you anyway. But that's a lie I told myself so I wouldn't feel guilty. The truth is, I didn't want to feel guilty. So I made it your problem instead of mine. She wrote about the restaurant, about how it failed not because of the lawsuit, but because she'd never had a real plan. About how she'd used Grandma's name as a brand without earning it. She didn't ask me to forgive her. That surprised me. You don't owe me anything, she wrote at the end. I just needed you to know that I know what I did, and I know it was wrong. I read the letter twice, sat with it for a while, listened to the frogs down by the water. I didn't know if she meant it. Maybe she did. Maybe it was another performance. But I realized it didn't matter. Not right now. My healing wasn't dependent on her sincerity. My peace wasn't a door she could open or close. I wrote back. Short. 1 paragraph. I read your letter. Thank you for writing it. I'm not ready for more than that. Take care of yourself, Vivian. I sealed it. Stamped it. Drove it to the post office the next morning. It wasn't an open door, but it wasn't a wall either. It was a boundary. And boundaries, I'd learned, don't have to be angry to be real. So that's my story. I'm not telling it because I want sympathy. I'm not telling it because I want you to hate my family. I'm telling it because I know that some of you are listening to this right now with a knot in your stomach because you recognize something. Maybe it's a parent who treats your silence as permission. Maybe it's a sibling who takes and calls it family. Maybe it's the way someone you love made a decision about your life, your money, your property, your time. And when you pushed back, they said you were the problem. If that's you, I want to say something. You are not ungrateful for protecting yourself. You are not selfish for saying no, and you are not alone. My grandmother taught me that water always finds its way. I lost her lake house. I lost the family. Or what I thought was a family. But I found my own path. It runs through a small apartment near Jordan Lake, through a courtroom where I stood in my uniform and told the truth, through a Sunday phone call with an old woman in a blue cardigan who promised my grandmother she'd look out for me. Setting a boundary isn't punishment, it's self-respect with a return address. I don't know what happens next with my father, with Vivian, with my mother. Maybe one day we'll sit in the same room again. Maybe we won't. But I know this. Whatever happens, it'll happen on terms I've chosen. Not terms that were forged in my name while I was 6,000 miles away, serving a country that at least had the decency to put its agreements in writing. If you've ever set a boundary, or if you're working up the courage to set one, tell me about it in the comments. I read every single one. Thank you for listening. Thank you for staying to the end. If this story stayed with you, I have one question. Which moment hit the hardest? The judge's ruling, or Helena standing at the lake one last time? Drop your answer below. And if you want more stories about people who chose courage over comfort, family drama that ends with justice, and boundaries that changed everything, check the description for more. I'll see you in the next one. Thank you for being here.